In your sports fans will be spoiled for choice as national sports teams will be playing in different competitions. The senior Springboks team will be taking on Georgia in Nelspruit for their final test match of the incoming tours. Now, junior Boks and New Zealand will clash in the final of the U20 World Championship. This happens in Italy, with Banyana Banyana set to battle it out with Senegal in the quarterfinals of the WAFCON, taking place in Morocco. For more on these games as well as others, we are now joined by News 24 sports journalist Khanyiso Tshwaku. A very good morning to you. Thank you so much for your time and insights as always. But firstly, Khanyiso, let's start with Banyana Banyana. We saw that they have started this WAFCON tournament slowly winning 2 games and drawing 1. What are your thoughts on how Dr. Desiree Ellis's team have played in the group stages so far?
Good morning, Mxolisi. Good morning to the viewers. Look, I mean, the long and the short of it is that for any sort of tournament sport, the key part is that you need to peak when it truly matters. Now, having seen how well Morocco played last night, having seen how well Nigeria played, remember that the winner of the South Africa-Senegal game will face Nigeria in the semi-finals. You probably want to start playing your best football from the quarter-final stage onwards. Yes, they were put on and off in the Ghana game that they did indeed win. And then from there, they were actually quite off in the Tanzania game that they did win. But against Mali, they started to show what the quality that they do possess as a side. So I think the key part for the key part now for them, especially in tonight's game, is just make sure that they improve on the small bits they didn't get right in the Mali game to get past what will be a very formidable Senegal side. As you can rightly see, the top 4 African women's teams started to take shape in this tournament. One does need to remember that this particular tournament doesn't serve as the qualifier for the 2027 World Cup. But I think the most important part is that it serves a very developmental purpose. Yes, as you can see with the players that she's chosen for this particular tournament, especially with the impending retirement of Jermaine Seposenwe at the end of this particular tournament, it then becomes important for players like Donnelly to start making their mark, especially in this tournament going forward.
And we saw Senegal just finish their group in the 3rd position with only 1 win and 2 losses, right? So they are basically coming into this game as the underdogs. And I'm always rooting for the underdogs, by the way. What do you think must be done to ensure that they go through to the semi-finals?
Look, whatever Banyana needs to do, it has to have an element of ruthlessness in front of goal. One of the biggest complaints that Desiree Ellis has had over the years as Banyana coach, and not just over this particular period, is a perceived lack of ruthlessness in front of goal, and it's caught up with them in some tournaments. I remember it caught up with them at the Olympic Games. So it does become very important. I mean, if there was a qualifier that Banyana didn't get past for the 2022 Olympics, for example, where against Botswana, they were absolutely very blunt in front of goal, and that cost them in the long run the pit shootout. And so one of the things she's always been insistent upon is ensuring that in that final third that they need to be clinical. And I think if they are as clinical, or even more clinical that they are in this particular game against Senegal, as compared to how they were against Mali, they probably should stand themselves in good state for a semi-final spot.
And let's just change tack to rugby now. The junior Boks are looking very strong in this year's Under-20 World Championship. Just what do you think has been their strength, and how do you think they will approach their game against New Zealand tonight?
Look, the first thing is cohesion. This is a group that actually played together last year. Yes, they didn't have the best of it across the 2 tournaments that they played here in South Africa. But I think also the change in conditions. They're playing in high summer in Calvisano. It's warm. But I think the key part is that they're not having to deal with some of the foul Cape weather that they had to deal with over the past 2 series, in the past 2 editions that were hosted here in South Africa. But I think the key part is that it is a team that has been put together over a while. If you look at the likes of Obatobe, and Hashim, these are players that are playing quite significantly at the lower levels. A Riley Norton was part of this group last year. So there are several players who are part of the Under-20 group last year. Also, the importance of the Junior Rugby Championship that put Australia, Argentina, and South Africa and New Zealand now has actually seen has been a very important platform for the players to actually just get through whatever teething issues that they have. But I think the most important part is that they've had a lot of time together with Coach Kevin Foot, where they've been able to iron out whatever creases that they've had. That was one of the challenges that South Africa and the Southern Hemisphere teams have had is preparation time leading into the under 20 World Cup. And I think over the past 2 seasons, they've gone a long way to actually just matching of the European teams have had in mind. Because remember that with the Southern Hemisphere teams, they only really start to get their place together from high school onwards, whereas with the European sides, they tend to get their place together from under 15, under 16 level onwards, and are able to build a group that is very competitive come under 18, under 20 level. Whereas with the Southern Hemisphere teams, it's generally from that high school under 18 level where the players all truly coming together as a unit.
And moving it up now to the senior Springboks, Coach Rassie Erasmus has been trying new combinations and giving new players opportunities with the latest test matches, you know, where we've seen new debutantes coming into the fold as well, and some of them even stood out. Let's hear who are those that stood out for you, and do you think that these games have given Coach Rassie a new pool of talent that he can choose from just going forward?
Look, I mean, if you look at the fact that Kobus Wiese is starting at 8, it's not a position that he plays regularly at the Bulls. He plays blindside, flank, and then plays number 4 lock. That will tell you that yes, the space has been made by his brother's red card, Jasper, in the second test in Kabeja last week, which is rather problematic because he's now out for 4 games, including this one. That will include the Australia test matches and the first New Zealand test in Auckland on the 9th of September. So it does become a problem. But I think if you look at the fact that he's playing number 8, also shows Rassie Erasmus' willingness to ensure that every player within that group is getting an opportunity. I would have thought that maybe a Jean-Luc Dupré would have got an opportunity, considering that there is a bit of a slight challenge at number 8 with injuries and now the suspension of Jasper Wiese. But it's clear that Rassie Erasmus has been able to effectively use these 2 tests against Italy, the Barbarians test, and along with today's test against Georgia, as a staging point for a very important rugby championship. Remember that South Africa will be hosting Australia across 2 test matches in South Africa. Then there'll be away in New Zealand for 2 test matches from where they'll have a home and away game. One of them will be against Argentina in Durban, and then the next one will be in Twickenham against Argentina. Argentina not taking the game to South America. So look, it becomes, I think, very important for us, and along with the fact that he's actually pitched a very fresh front row, Boan Venter, Marnus van der Merwe, and Yetlan Forshey, all lining up for test match debuts. So it's a very fresh front row, but if you look at a game like Georgia, that's probably the best staging point for those kind of players.
Right, News 24 sports journalist Khanyiso Tshwaku joining us there. Thanks very much indeed for your time and insights on the program.